Welcome back. Scott Dolch is joining me this morning. He's president and CEO of the Connecticut Restaurant Association. We invited him on the program to take a look forward to what the restaurant business in our state might look like in 2025 and where the successes and challenges were in 2024. Welcome. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks, Eric, as always, for having me.
We're in a time of year where a lot of people just went to a lot of your member restaurants, a lot of busy, entertaining type events over, the Thanksgiving and Christmas and holiday season. A little bit of a quieter time, but let's look forward first as we head into 2025. What's the outlook for restaurants in our state?
I think the outlook is obviously being optimistic is really positive. I think we had a really good winter. Obviously, always worry about as we're still in the winter months what the weather's going to look like. The weather can play a huge factor with your team here as we talk about weekends and you talk about the kind of Hartford County region. This area. It's important that people get out and support them in January. They kind of lead up to Valentine's Day, and you kind of have those earmarked. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Valentine's Day. You have kind of those holidays that come up, but also making sure people are getting out when they can to support our restaurants any way they can.
What about looking back at 2024? How was that year for the industry? Were there specific challenges? Were there some big successes? What do you look to as you look back on the year that just ended?
It's a great question, Eric. I think it was a good year overall, but I think it's still a challenge. Inflation still plays a role. I mean, yes, we're post-COVID, we're years after this, but the effects that it still has on everyone, it has an effect on a small business, and our restaurants are no stranger to that. When you talk about inflation, you talk about labor challenges, you talk about I just talked to someone today about the insurance costs rising almost double what it was last year for liquor liability. So those are the things that affect restaurants because they need to be profitable. They are in business to be profitable, but you can only increase your menu prices so much. You need people to come in through your doors. So it's really important that they're efficient and making sure that and then also where the trends are. What people want to look for, how they are eating and dining out. We've seen a huge rise and continue people not going to dine in. They want to either take their food, their dinners home. They maybe want to, there's no flexibility in breakfast, lunch, and dinner the same hours anymore. It's like some people want to, just want to be available all the time. And how can a restaurant be all those things to all their customers? So kind of working through all that. But 24 was still a good year, but I'm hoping for even better 25.
Yeah, you mentioned it, I think, a couple times in that answer is that these restaurants are small businesses at their core. And, something like the cost of insurance for liquor liability, as a customer, I don't see that. So if my hamburger went up by a couple bucks, I'm not understanding why. But is that part of the challenge of running those businesses that, yeah, sure, the beef might be more expensive and that might play a role in the hamburger cost, but so might liquor insurance, liquor liability insurance.
Yeah, everything. I mean, everyone knows it at home. If whether it's the cost for whatever daily life, going to the grocery store, gas prices, my insurance in my house. The same is effect for a small business owner. They're seeing rising costs across the board, and the last thing that a restaurant really wants to do is increase their menu costs. Because at the end of the day, they want their customers to be able to afford to come out and come out multiple times. If one customer can only come out once a month versus they always came out twice a month, you multiply that by your customer base. That affects the viability of your restaurant staying in business. So that's a huge part of this conversation that we have every day with our restaurants and making sure that they can be efficient, they can be profitable, and they're making the right decisions. That's why you're seeing different hours and fluctuations or things that they're offering. Maybe their menus are shrinking. Maybe their hours are a little bit different. Because at the end of the day, they want to be as profitable in the times they can be with what they have to offer.
As we flipped the calendar to 25, a new minimum wage took effect in our state. There's been a lot of talk, particularly with your industry, about tipped workers in minimum wage and general workers in minimum wage. How does that play into the calculus as they look towards profitability in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Our minimum wage goes up to $16.35 as of this past week, and it's the third highest in the country. And I say to only behind California and the state of Washington. So in the Northeast, we are leading, in a minimum wage piece, which has a huge effect on small businesses. It's not just the base entry-level job. We are very much driven in an industry by a lot of people making hourly wages, whether it's a line cook at 22, 23. So as this thing continues to rise, the ask of everyone behind the house that you talk about, you don't know, to run a restaurant, they're asking for those raises as well. And the last thing they want to do is, okay, how are we going to still stay profitable? What's the menu cost going to be? So we're trying to talk to legislators, talk to the governor about, I want to be competitive in New England. Obviously, we understand that there's going to be increases. I'm not against, talking about an honest increase, but I think the increase has been almost too fast in such a short window. I mean, we've gone from 10.10 to 16.35 in about 7.5 years, where it went from about 8 something to 10.10 over 20 years. So we need to have those honest conversations inside the building to talk about, I don't think we want to be the leader. I think we want to be competitive in New England with what our minimum wage is.
Well, speaking of the governor and the legislature, they'll be open up the session in just a couple of days. What is your ask as an industry that they keep in mind? I mean, you mentioned that piece, but are there other big things they could do to help your members in the restaurant industry?
Yeah, I mean, the big ones that we want to, continue to educate them on is how minimum wage plays a role, which we just talked about, the tip credit, how, our servers and bartenders are making $35 an hour on average, not really getting involved in that. I think the governor has a big understanding, which is helpful, but then some of the things they could help with, I think you're talking about, all the different fees. Credit card swipe fees is like the third highest fee for a restaurant now, and the banks that, we're trying to look at bills and ways to try to alleviate some of those costs. Also, tourism dollars is a big one, Erica. I think that, when you look at our industry, look at the growth of our industry over the last, probably decade, we need to make sure that our state is putting those same dollars back into hospitality in the long run. And we're seeing that budget continue to be cut year after year. When you look at the amount of sales and use tax, hospitality is generating about $1.2 billion to the state's sales and use tax annually. We feel that the tourism dollars should be competitive, if not a leader in New England.
When you're the spokesperson for an entire industry, you got to talk a lot about minimum wage and costs you don't see and people behind the house. But there's a lot of great things happening in restaurants. I know you had your awards back in the fall, and you gave a lot of credit to some really good things. We have some video here of the crazies, not just a few weeks ago, really. And there's a lot of good things happening in our restaurant. I think it's important to mention that too, Scott. No,
Eric, I appreciate it. I think, that's my favorite time of the year. You see the photos that are up there. I mean, to have 1,500 people come together in Foxwoods, it is like the Oscars. We give out Restaurant of the Year, Chef of the Year, just highlights server, bartender, highlight our entire industry. And that's partly, my background in sports and history. Like, I want to put Connecticut hospitality on the map. And I think the Crazies has helped done that. We won our first James Beard in 17 years with David Standers down in Mystic. Renee Tupont became a finalist for Outstanding Chef. You have restaurants getting that recognition regionally and nationally, and people travel. Culinary tourism is a real thing. People travel to Connecticut for the food scene, and I think we've helped establish that. And I hope we continue to build it for years to come.
Just 30 seconds left, but tell me, you have an event coming up in March, and we probably won't see you before that, and it's important to the future of your industry, right?
Yeah, our foundation is another part of what we do, and in talking about the future of our industry, we have a state high school culinary competition we have every year at Duncan Park, where we're going to have 8 high schools competing in a culinary, which is amazing, so much fun to watch. But all the proceeds, and then our restaurants get involved that week by giving things out, like almost like a little mini restaurant week, where all the proceeds go back to the foundation, so we can do more for scholarships, do more for these culinary programs around the state, because it is the future of what our industry is, and we need to make sure people look at culinary, in such a great light, like you talked about, because nothing better than hospitality.
Right, and if you get those young people, get them early, get them excited, get them seeing the Crazies, and maybe they'll be out there and be the next winner.
That's what we hope for.
Scott Dolch, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Eric.